James Wheeler, your information. Today's information.
I need you to understand something very clearly right now. What I am about to reveal to you represents the most significant convergence of imperial failures that we have witnessed in our lifetime. January 2026 marks the moment when three seismic shifts have collided, and the American empire stands exposed in ways that the corporate media will never show you. My sources on the ground, analysts I have been working with for years, independent journalists risking their careers to tell the truth, they are all reporting the same thing. The official narrative has completely collapsed. For decades, I have covered wars, coups, and CIA operations across the globe. I have watched empires rise and fall. And what is unfolding right now, in this very moment, is the visible disintegration of American hegemony. Trump promised to bring Iran to its knees. He promised economic renaissance. He promised American strength restored. What we have instead is a president drowning at 39% approval, facing 358 lawsuits, watching his own allies flee toward Beijing. And the regime he vowed to destroy? It is closer to nuclear weapons than ever before. This is not speculation. This is not analysis from some think tank funded by defense contractors. This is what is actually happening while your television tells you everything is under control. The breaking news that mainstream outlets refuse to report is that the empire has achieved the precise opposite of every stated objective. Iran was supposed to collapse. It accelerated its nuclear program. Allies were supposed to rally. They are hedging toward China. The dollar was supposed to dominate. The multipolar alternative is now operational. I have been tracking these developments since the June 2025 strikes, speaking with sources in the Middle East, following the money flows, analyzing the military movements. What I discovered exposes the greatest strategic miscalculation in modern American history, and the implications for every single person watching this, whether you are in New York or Nairobi. Whether you pay taxes to Washington or suffer under its sanctions, are absolutely staggering. So let me walk you through what is really happening. Let me show you the evidence they are hiding, because by the time we are finished here, you will understand why the world you thought you knew is already gone. To comprehend the magnitude of what January 2026 represents, we need to understand the context that the mainstream media systematically obscures. This did not emerge from nowhere. This is the direct consequence of decades of imperial overreach, and specifically the catastrophic decisions made in June 2025. The real story is fundamentally different from what you have been told. On June 13th, 2025, Israel launched what they called Operation Rising Lion against Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Over 200 fighter jets, 330 munitions, approximately 100 targets, including the Natanz enrichment facility. More than 1,000 Iranians killed, including nuclear scientists and IRGC commanders. Iran retaliated with hundreds of missiles and drones, killing at least 33 in Israel. This was already unprecedented, but what came next changed everything. On June 21st, Donald Trump made history in the worst possible way. He became the first American president to directly attack another nation's nuclear program. Bunker buster strikes on Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz. Iran responded by striking Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, and then, just 48 hours later, a ceasefire was declared. Think about that timing. The empire launched unprecedented strikes, Iran hit back at American forces in Qatar, and suddenly Washington wanted to stop fighting. What does that tell you about who was actually deterred? The backdrop to this confrontation spans 4 decades of imperial pressure, comprehensive sanctions since 1979, Trump's withdrawal from the JCPOA nuclear deal in 2018, the designation of the IRGC as a terrorist organization, the assassination of General Soleimani in January 2020. The empire surrounded Iran with military bases in 19 locations across 10 countries, approximately 40,000 American troops positioned to intimidate, to threaten, to coerce. Iran was supposed to be isolated, weakened by sanctions, ripe for regime change. The maximum pressure campaign was designed to strangle the economy until the government collapsed. But what the architects of this strategy failed to understand, what they consistently failed to understand, is that external pressure often consolidates internal power. The more Washington threatened, the more Tehran integrated with the emerging multipolar bloc. Full membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in 2023. BRICS accession in January 2024. A comprehensive strategic partnership with China signed in 2021. A 20-year strategic partnership treaty with Russia in January 2025. The empire viewed Iran as cornered. In reality, Iran was building escape routes that Washington could not bomb. This is the critical context that the corporate press ignores. They present the June strikes as American strength. They show the explosions, the destroyed facilities, the declarations of victory. What they do not show is the strategic reality. Iran absorbed the first direct American strike on a nuclear program in history and emerged with its leadership intact, its population unified against external aggression, and its multipolar alliances deeper than ever. By January 2026, the correlation of forces has shifted dramatically. The BRICS bloc expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE. Russia and China now settle 99.1% of bilateral trade in rubles and yuan, not dollars. China's CIPS payment system connects 4,800 banks across 185 countries. The alternative architecture is no longer theoretical, it is operational, and Iran sits at the heart of it. Understanding the confrontation requires recognizing who the real actors are and what drives them. On one side, you have the Islamic Republic of Iran, a nation that has survived every form of imperial assault for 45 years. Comprehensive sanctions, assassination campaigns, cyber attacks, proxy wars on every border, and now direct military strikes from both Israel and the United States. This is a government that was supposed to collapse under pressure. Instead, it built the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East, over 3,000 missiles, before the war. What the empire consistently underestimates is the logic of survival under siege. When you have been sanctioned for decades, when your generals are assassinated, when your scientists are murdered, when foreign powers openly discuss regime change, you do not become more compliant. You become more determined. You build indigenous capabilities because you cannot rely on imports. You develop asymmetric deterrence because you cannot match conventional firepower. You pursue nuclear threshold status because it is the only guarantee against invasion. In June 2025, Iran faced an existential choice: absorb unprecedented military strikes and appear weak, inviting further aggression, or retaliate and risk total war with the combined forces of the United States and Israel. The regime chose measured response: strikes against Israeli territory to demonstrate capability, a strike against the American base in Qatar to show Washington its troops were not beyond reach, calibrated escalation that stopped short of triggering all-out war. This calculated response exposed something the empire did not want revealed: Iran could hit back. The missiles reached their targets. American forces in Qatar were within range. Israeli territory was vulnerable. The emperor had no clothes, or at least fewer clothes than advertised. On the other side stands the American empire under Trump's chaotic leadership. This administration inherited the most formidable military economic apparatus in human history: unmatched kinetic capability, the dollar's dominance with 90% of forex transactions and 59% of global reserves, NATO's combined military spending, a network of bases encircling adversaries on every continent. The traditional toolkit for controlling Iran included everything short of outright invasion: sanctions designed to collapse the economy, assassination of key leaders, cyber attacks on nuclear facilities, support for internal opposition, military encirclement meant to intimidate, and when all else failed, the threat of overwhelming force. Trump's fatal error was believing that bombs could accomplish what decades of pressure could not. The June strikes were designed to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. In doing so, they obliterated the remaining constraints. Before the attack, Iran operated under international oversight, limited by the remnants of the JCPOA framework. After the attack, Tehran concluded that any reconstituted program must be fully clandestine. Any future facilities must be beyond the reach of bunker busters. Any strategy must include actual nuclear deterrent, not just threshold capability. This is the paradox of imperial violence. The strike intended to prevent Iranian nuclear weapons may have guaranteed them. The attack meant to demonstrate American strength revealed American limitations. The war designed to restore deterrence proved that deterrence flows both ways. Meanwhile, Trump compounded the strategic disaster with economic self-harm. His tariff war, the highest effective tariff rate since 1943, alienated the very allies Washington needs to maintain pressure on adversaries. The 11.2% rate functions as a massive tax on American consumers. $1,100 per family in 2025, rising to $1,500 in 2026. Penn Wharton projects 6% long-term GDP reduction and 5% wage decline. The empire is bleeding itself to fund a confrontation that strengthened its enemies. The consequences are visible in every metric. Domestic support collapsing with only 29% of independents, 30% of Latinos, and 30% of youth backing the president. International alliances fraying, with the United Kingdom refusing base access, Saudi Arabia condemning the strikes, Europe launching initiatives to reduce dollar dependence, military position eroding, with Iraq announcing complete withdrawal of American forces and at least 70 attacks on U.S. bases since October 2023. The empire that promised strength delivers chaos. The administration that promised to crush Iran watches it rebuild at wartime pace. Now we come to the revelations that expose the full scope of what has occurred. What I am about to share represents layer after layer of information that the mainstream press either ignores or buries beneath euphemism. Each revelation builds on the last. Each exposes more of the lie. The first truth you need to grasp is the January 2026 crisis convergence. This is not a single problem, but multiple failures colliding simultaneously. Trump's approval has crashed to 39% with a net negative 24 points, the lowest since Nixon faced impeachment. 358 lawsuits challenge his executive authority. Democrats have won 40 of 51 resolved cases. The Supreme Court blocked military deployments to American cities. And while the president battles legal chaos at home, Iraq announced the complete withdrawal of U.S. forces from its federal territory. The coalition mission ended in September 2025. The remaining troops are leaving. After 2 decades, trillions of dollars, and hundreds of thousands of lives, America is being shown the door. The second revelation concerns what actually happened in June 2025. Trump declared Iran's nuclear program obliterated. The corporate media repeated this claim uncritically, but intelligence assessments tell a radically different story. Iran's breakout time to nuclear weapons did not increase after the strikes. It dropped to near zero. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that Iran possesses enough enriched material for 9 nuclear weapons if processed to weapons grade. Not 1, not 2, 9. The attack meant to destroy the program accelerated it. This brings us to the third layer of truth. In December 2025, reports emerged that Supreme Leader Khamenei authorized development of miniaturized nuclear warheads for ballistic missiles. Read that again. The strike designed to prevent Iranian nuclear weapons led directly to authorization of nuclear warhead development. This is not speculation from war hawks seeking another conflict. This is the consequence of the last one. The JCPOA restrictions that Trump abandoned in 2018 began expiring in January 2026. Whatever limited oversight remained is now gone. The fourth revelation exposes Iran's military reconstruction. After the June strikes, assessments estimated roughly 1,000 missiles remained from the pre-war arsenal of over 3,000. The empire assumed this represented lasting degradation. They were wrong. Iran's missile factories went into 24-hour production. By December 2025, the arsenal had rebuilt to an estimated 2,000 missiles. The infrastructure to produce weapons matters more than the weapons themselves. You can destroy missiles, but unless you occupy the country, you cannot destroy factories operating around the clock. This connects to the fifth truth the media obscures. In April 2025, before the strikes even occurred, the IRGC transferred new ballistic and cruise missiles to Iraqi militias. Iran distributed its deterrent capability beyond its borders. Even if every Iranian missile were destroyed, the proxy network retains strike capacity. This is asymmetric defense at the strategic level. The target is everywhere and nowhere. The sixth revelation demonstrates how completely the alliance system has fractured. When Trump ordered strikes on Iran, he expected allies to rally behind American leadership. The opposite occurred. The United Kingdom refused to allow U.S. use of Diego Garcia and Cyprus bases. Saudi Arabia publicly condemned the attacks. The United Arab Emirates condemned them. Turkey condemned them. These are supposed to be American partners, nations that host bases and buy weapons and coordinate policy. They watched Washington launch an unprecedented strike and said no. The European Union responded not with solidarity, but with initiatives to reduce dollar dependence and strengthen ties with China and India. A new term emerged in diplomatic circles, one that captures the shift. World -1, global economic governance minus American leadership. The empire that styled itself as indispensable is being bypassed. The seventh layer of truth concerns the multipolar military coordination that has accelerated since June. The CRINC exercises, that is China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, tripled from an average of 3.2 per year between 2003 and 2021 to 9.5 per year between 2022 and 2025. In January 2026, Chinese, Russian, and Iranian warships gathered off South Africa for joint exercises named Will for Peace. The message could not be clearer. Survive the American strike, and the multipolar bloc embraces you. The eighth revelation is the one that should matter most to American viewers. The tariff policy supposedly designed to strengthen American manufacturing has instead become the largest tax increase as a percentage of GDP since 1993, $1,500 per family in 2026, 0.5 percentage points added to inflation. Goldman Sachs confirms this. Penn Wharton projects $22,000 in lifetime losses for middle-class families. The empire is taxing its own citizens to fund a confrontation that achieved the opposite of stated objectives. The ninth truth exposes the depth of domestic opposition to the administration. Not just polls showing historic disapproval, 71 lawsuits filed by Democratic state attorneys general alone. Democrats winning 40 of 51 court cases challenging executive actions. Economic approval at a historic low of 31%. The president who claimed mandate operates with the support of less than a third of the population on his signature economic policies. And the 10th revelation points toward what comes next. Iranian protests erupted on December 28, 2025, across all 31 provinces. The rial has lost 90% of its value since 2018. 40% since June 2025 alone. Millions took to the streets by January 9th. Death estimates range from 2,000 to 20,000. At least 18,400 arrested by January 14th. The regime Trump attacked faces genuine internal crisis. But consider the irony. American officials and the exiled Pahlavi's son openly call for regime change, threaten to kill the Ayatollahs, promise support for revolution. Every such statement allows Tehran to frame protesters as imperial agents. External pressure that was supposed to topple the government instead provides justification for crackdowns. Who authorized the June strikes knowing they would accelerate nuclear development? Who benefits from policies that cost American families $1,500 annually? Who decided that attacking Iranian facilities would somehow prevent the outcomes that have now materialized? Where is the accountability? Where is the investigation? Where is the media asking these basic questions? Here is what the evidence compels us to acknowledge. The first American strike on a foreign nuclear program in history produced a faster nuclear timeline, not slower, faster. The maximum pressure campaign produced maximum multipolar integration, not isolation, integration. The projection of American strength produced visible American isolation, not respect, isolation. Every metric of success that the administration claimed has inverted. Look at the numbers one more time. Iran's breakout time before June 2025 was measured in weeks. After the strikes meant to extend it, breakout time dropped to near zero. Material sufficient for 9 nuclear weapons sits in Iranian facilities. Warhead miniaturization is authorized. The arsenal rebuilt from 1,000 to 2,000 missiles in 6 months. This is obliteration. This is victory. This is the outcome of the first direct American strike on a nuclear program. The empire has achieved a strategic catastrophe and called it success. The corporate media has amplified the lie, and the American public, paying $1,500 extra per family while watching allies flee and adversaries strengthen, is expected to believe that everything is proceeding according to plan. The truth is both simpler and more devastating. Empires decline when the cost of maintaining dominance exceeds the benefits it provides. The United States in January 2026 maintains approximately 40,000 troops across 19 installations in 10 Middle Eastern countries. It subsidizes global security while running massive deficits. It launches strikes that accelerate the threats they were meant to eliminate. It imposes tariffs that tax its own citizens. It alienates allies who now calculate that American protection may be as dangerous as American hostility. Meanwhile, the multipolar alternative crystallizes. The BRICS unit currency, backed by 40% gold and 60% member currencies, offers an alternative to dollar dependence. China's CIPS payment system provides infrastructure for those seeking to bypass American financial control. Russia and China demonstrate that great power trade can occur entirely outside the dollar system. The architecture exists. The on-ramps are built. Nations merely need sufficient motivation to use them, and American policy keeps providing that motivation. What does this mean for the correlation of forces going forward? Consider what other nations observe. Iran survived the most severe attack ever launched against a nuclear program by the world's preeminent military power. It survived and accelerated its program. It survived and rebuilt its arsenal. It survived and deepened its integration with China and Russia. The lesson is unmistakable. Nuclear threshold status, or actual nuclear capability, provides the only reliable defense against American aggression. This is the proliferation logic that Washington's own actions have created. The strike meant to demonstrate that pursuing nuclear weapons leads to destruction instead demonstrated that insufficient nuclear capability leads to vulnerability. The rational response for any nation fearing American attack is to sprint toward deterrent capacity. The empire has incentivized exactly what it claimed to prevent. For the Middle East, the implications are seismic. American forces are withdrawing from Iraq. The presence in Syria, roughly 1,400 troops, faces constant attack with 70 incidents since October 2023. 2 American soldiers killed in an ISIS attack at Palmyra. The regional order that Washington dominated for 3 decades is ending. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Turkey, traditional American partners, have publicly broken with Washington on Iran policy. They are hedging because they recognize what the Pentagon apparently cannot. The correlation of forces has shifted. For Europe, the fracture runs equally deep. The refusal of the United Kingdom to provide base access for Iran operations represents a break with decades of special relationship. European initiatives to reduce dollar dependence signal that even the closest allies no longer trust American leadership to serve their interests. The term World Minus One captures the emerging consensus. Global governance will proceed with or without American participation. For the American public, the implications are immediate and material. You are paying for this failure. The $1,500 annual tariff cost per family is a direct tax on your household to fund a geopolitical strategy that has achieved the opposite of every stated objective. The projected 6% long-term GDP reduction means permanently lower growth. The 5% wage decline projection means your children will earn less than they would have in a competently managed system. And for what? To strengthen adversaries, to alienate allies, to accelerate nuclear proliferation. The multipolar transition is no longer a prediction. It is an observation. Russia-China trade in local currencies at 99.1%. BRICS expansion bringing in regional powers across 3 continents. Alternative payment systems connecting thousands of banks in over 180 countries. The dollar retains dominance, but the trend lines all point one direction. And American policy, rather than reversing this trajectory, accelerates it with every sanction, every tariff, every military strike that demonstrates the costs of remaining within the dollar system. If you live in the United States, your government spent your tax dollars attacking a country that emerged stronger, alienating allies who now hedge toward rivals, and implementing tariffs that function as a regressive tax on your household. You are funding the acceleration of American decline. You are paying for the strategic catastrophe that the corporate media calls success. If you live elsewhere, you are watching the slow-motion collapse of the entity that has dominated global affairs since 1945. The implications vary by your position. For nations under American sanction, the multipolar architecture offers alternatives that did not exist a decade ago. For nations hosting American bases, the calculation of costs and benefits is shifting. For nations seeking development without Washington's permission, doors are opening that were previously sealed. The empire will not accept this transition peacefully. A wounded presidency facing electoral oblivion in the November 2026 midterms may seek military distraction. Benjamin Netanyahu has discussed a second round of strikes with Trump for this year. Iranian officials have warned that American troops in Israel will be legitimate targets if attacked again. The conditions for catastrophic escalation exist. 40,000 American troops in range of Iranian missiles. A president desperate for any narrative other than failure. An Israeli government that sees opportunity in American chaos. But alongside the danger exists genuine hope. The multipolar order emerging is not perfect. China has its own hegemonies, its own repressions. Russia is no paradise of freedom. But the end of unipolarity means the end of one power claiming the right to bomb any nation that defies its dictates. It means alternatives for countries seeking to chart their own course. It means the possibility, however fragile, of a world where sovereignty is more than permission granted by Washington. 2026 will reveal whether the empire chooses managed decline or catastrophic confrontation. The answer affects everyone on this planet. You cannot afford to be passive observers consuming whatever narrative the corporate press provides. You need to understand what is actually happening. You need to share this information with others who remain trapped in the mainstream bubble. You need to support the independent journalists and analysts risking their careers to tell the truth. The architects of this disaster will not hold themselves accountable. The media that amplified their lies will not suddenly discover integrity. The institutions that failed will not reform themselves. Change comes only when enough people see clearly, speak truthfully, and demand alternatives to the catastrophic path we are currently traveling. What I have shown you today represents evidence that anyone can verify. The approval ratings are public. The lawsuit counts are documented. The IAEA assessments are on record. The tariff calculations come from mainstream institutions like Penn Wharton and Goldman Sachs. The alliance fractures are visible in the statements of leaders from London to Riyadh to Ankara. This is not conspiracy theory. This is observable reality that contradicts official narrative. The world is changing, and it is changing fast. The unipolar moment that began in 1991 is ending before our eyes. The question is not whether the transition will occur, but whether it will occur through managed adjustment or through the catastrophic wars of a declining empire unwilling to accept reality. You have a role in determining which path prevails. Informed citizens demanding accountability, independent media challenging propaganda, global solidarity across borders that imperial division tries to maintain. The empire has revealed its nature. The multipolar alternative has demonstrated its viability. The choice before us is clearer than ever, and that choice, that fundamental decision about what kind of world we build from the ruins of American hegemony, is precisely what is at stake. For decades, I have covered wars, coups, and CIA operations across the globe. I have watched empires rise and fall. And what is unfolding right now, in this very moment, is the visible disintegration of American hegemony. Trump promised to bring Iran to its knees. He promised economic renaissance. He promised American strength restored. What we have instead is a president drowning at 39% approval, facing 358 lawsuits, watching his own allies flee toward Beijing. And the regime he vowed to destroy, it is closer to nuclear weapons than ever before.